SkyBlue, a YA Gothic retelling of the Bluebeard fairy tale, by mphalliday. Chapter 1. Poacher. I can only pretend to listen. The pastor's remarks are longer than Papa would have liked, woody tones vibrating from his cords as if he had a cello caught in his throat. He speaks of death as a door, the will of fate unlocking it to usher us in. Fate, he says, is a map, and God is the master cartographer. Mama hangs on his words like rope, her knuckles tight with grief around her twisted handkerchief. If death is a door, then it's too easily opened. The cemetery is stifling, its headstones crammed, leaning with the centuries. Stone angels droop toward the graves in poses meant to venerate and bless the dead, but seem instead to pity them. Amidst the crumbling fieldstone, my brothers assist the undertaker in lowering our father's casket into the earth, which had frozen in the night, taking several hours to dig. Brian grunts, the weight of our father dragging down his shoulders. A droplet of sweat courses Simon's temple, proof to me that my brothers have rarely experienced such back-breaking labor. At harvest, when our orchard was ripe and hands were few, Papa elected to hire the sons of widows or the odd vagrant passing through to haul away the apple crates. To his sons, he taught that a proper work ethic was rooted in the intellectual minds rather than physical labor. As such, Simon and Brian have hardly worked a spade, let alone the new military muskets strapped to their backs. They step back from the grave, their chins pointed to their chests in their new cavalry uniforms of yellow, gold, and black. They look like targets. Don't worry, they said, as if such an inane comfort could possibly even help. India is not war-torn, but the Crown has lent troops to protect the interests of the East India Company, our country's monopoly on global trade. My brothers also neglected to mention the tigers in Cholera, either of which would kill without remorse. Just thinking of it spins worry in my mind, and tears press against my eyes. I clench my jaw to hold them back. My sister's tears are enough for the both of us. At my side, Anna sobs into her hands, her breath pitching like a ship's sail torn loose. She looks at me and I can barely contain myself, though not just out of grief at losing our father. No, it's much worse than that. Much worse because I'm a selfish creature. The truth of my situation, a yoke of burden, fear pressing on my neck. If my brothers leave, then I must stay, and all of my dreams with me. I don't think I'll get the chance to see the world as Papa saw it. Reverend Moody's black eyes lift from his Bible, cutting Anna a glance of distaste as she cries. He is shrewd and bigoted, believing that women have no place at a gravesite or even in the world. I despise his callousness, his patronizing tone as he implies my father's life was one lacking in heavenly fortitude. His business called him away on too many Sundays, too many sermons missed. Well, he's present for this one now, and us girls who don't belong in this scene by the angels, all we want is to look at Papa one last time and say goodbye, cursing death's doors forever opening. The morning breeze lifts, a crow flitting over the pastor's black-brimmed hat. For one blinding moment, I wonder if Papa opened death's door on his own, welcoming the other side with his arms outstretched, the wounds at his wrists weeping out his life instead of saving him. Bloodletting, our physician said, would kill the consumption. So Papa lifted his hands and he looked at me saying, "Take care of your heart, Beatrice." And then his eyes went to Anna and to Mama, and I realized what his words really meant. Once he passed, I would be their keeper. My fists shake against my sides. I take a breath, and the smell of wet earth sticks to my lungs. My brothers, their chests broad and yet so breakable, set sail for India tomorrow. At dawn, I'll be left to care for our mother and sister alone. The sky commences to drizzle out a misty English rain, muddying the open grave. My chest seizes, petrified that if we don't bury Papa soon, his body'll decay before my eyes, and then I'll really have lost him. Already the worms, awakened by the rude disruptions of the undertaker's spade, drag their intestinal bodies across the casket. As if revived, a beetle breaks through the mud at the grave's edge, climbing into the air. It hovers in front of my nose, wings blurred, colors shifting from black to gold to iridescent blue. My heart flutters as the insect zips through the sky across the cemetery where the crow dives for it in the air, crushing it in its mouth and devouring it. The bird alights on the headstone of an Irish cross, beyond which stands a man at an open grave, burying his dead alone. It is Monsieur Dumas. Intriguing. One of my cleverest and most incessant companions settles my rampant heartbeats. I've never seen Monsieur Dumas in the flesh before, though I know his broad figure from the titillations of drawing-room gossip. Very little is known about the Frenchman, except that he's an aristocrat with lineage extending back to Madame la Guillotine in that bloody war. One can easily see his arcane and Gothic manor house atop Shakespeare Cliff, overlooking the harbor, but few have been inside it. Like some fox in the hedgerow, Monsieur Dumas shows himself only when he wants to be seen. His head isn't bent in misery like mine, though his shoulders have the curve of someone unalterably depressed. News of his wife's death rushed about town like a hurricane, obscuring Papa's passing as if he were a transient who died in the outskirts, close to home, but not close enough to pity him. The townsfolk have quickly forgotten their best merchant and tradesman. I wonder what she was like, Monsieur Dumas's wife. I wonder if his love for her was more sincere than for the wives who came before her. There have been several of them, or so I've heard. The crow squawks from its perch, and Monsieur Dumas lifts his head in my direction. My gaze darts away before our eyes can meet, so I glimpse only a quarter of him, an eye black as space, and one dark arched brow. Little shivers prick at my spine like witchcraft. An umbrella appears overhead, the piney odor of gin accompanying it. An oily voice invades my ear. "Black is not your best color," Mr. Hackshall says, the man I despise most above all others. "And pandering for my interest isn't yours," I say, raising my sleeve to shield my nose from the smell. "You're late." "I was mourning." "You were drinking." "Is that not the same?" We hushed as the Reverend Moody reads his final lines, commending Papa's soul to God. He nods to the undertaker, who lifts his spade for the final time. I don't expect the thud that comes from the earth hitting the pine, or the hollow sound it makes in my chest. Other hollow sounds, like the words "I'm ready," rope themselves around me. Final words are empty things, deficient promises, and senseless comforts. Papa's last words seemed illogical. How can one ever be ready for death? The idea is like a plunge into a river of ice when the plunge is not a plunge but a push. You see your end, there, on the bank of your life, but never expect to feel so bitterly the weight of water. It's usually then when a hand breaches the void and pulls you out, saving you. Papa's fight was brief and defenseless. He gave up too readily, and that, more than anything, is what makes me mourn. The pastor leaves us without further comment or comfort. Mama's, trailing her fingers across her pale mouth, repeats Papa's name like a mantra, as if worshipping a gilded idol with 6 arms and 2 faces. "Charlie, Charlie." His last kiss haunts her. She feels it still, the grooves of Papa's lips, the pucker of a marriage sweet but severed too soon. "Mama, let's leave this place," Anna says, taking our mother's arm to pull her away. She goes willingly, Charlie still on her breath. "Such a pity," I startle, remembering Mr. Hackshall standing behind me, sheltering me from the downpour. He lays an unscrupulous hand on my back, veiling it as consolation. It lingers too long and too low. Everything about Papa's business partner is thin, his face, his fingers, his pocketbook, his ethics. A drip of rain slides down his narrow nose, notched in the middle with a scar, which my father gave him. Papa caught him in their office one night, drunk, with all of their documents dangerously close to the hearth. One lick of flame and their whole business would have burned. As his partner, Papa couldn't fire Mr. Hackshall, but he could break his nose. "I gave Charles my word," Hackshall says, his voice smug. "His family will receive every care and comfort they stand in need of." His hand vexes, creeping greedily around my hip. I nudge him off, stepping backwards to my father's grave. I have a pressing need to join him there, just to be rid of this despicable man before me. "Your words are worthless," I spit. "You can barely take care of yourself. You look like a vagabond and you smell like a tavern." His face contorts. He grabs my arm and the umbrella drops to the mud, soaking us instantly in rain. My brothers are on him in a blink, wrenching him backwards. "Touch her again and you'll find my musket widening your navel," says Byron, Simon moving to his side, cautioning him against recklessness. Mr. Haskell stops wriggling, wincing under my brother's grip. An amused, wolfish smile spreads his lips. "Do it," he says, spittle foaming in the corners of his mouth. See what victories you achieve from within a prison cell. Leave him, Byron. Simon's prudence irritates his twin, though he's never ignored him. Just this once, I wish he would. Byron lets go with a shove. Mark me, cur. You'll not lay a hand on this family so long as I'm alive. Steadying himself, Mr. Haskell picks up the umbrella, shielding me with it once again. Beyond his eyes, I see a lion prowling, pacing its den. You forget, boy. The contract I signed with your father is binding. You forfeited your rights to his business the moment you pissed your inheritance away on that whore. He laughs, the sound keeping strange time with the undertakers shoveling behind us. You should have known the second that she sat on your lap she was a charlatan, and you thought you were in love. Byron lunges, but Simon is on him, holding him back. I throw out my hand. That's enough, Byron, I hiss. Go home. You're disgracing us. He's the disgrace, Byron cries. She's right, brother. A melting sort of weariness pulls at Simon's mouth. This isn't the place. My will is spent, and I no longer have the patience to defend you. Byron recoils in disbelief, his fists like stone, heavy and enduring. Defense is worthless when the defender is a coward. His regret flashes over him as soon as the words leave his mouth. Simon hides his hurt well, but never well enough. It's true he's cautious, but not gutless. He'd follow Byron to the ends of the earth, and he is. And all because of Byron's carelessness with the women he thinks he loves. I've had enough of this. Byron, please go. Let me mourn our father in peace. His anger slips from his shoulders, and he prods away from us with his musket thumping against his back. Simon, loyal to a fault, makes to go, but hesitates when he realizes I'll be left alone with Mr. Haskell. The glances they exchange are full of disdain. Byron needs you, I say, speaking I'll be fine with my eyes. Be sure he doesn't do anything rash. He goes, if only because he's seen me handle Haskell's impertinence on several previous occasions. He looks back at us twice. Driven by the deluge, the undertaker finishes his task with unearthly speed. I watch him unceremoniously shovel the last of the mud over Papa, the cemetery gates clashing behind him as he takes his leave. Unfeeling and indifferent, just like the pastor. I search for Monsieur Dumas, the last living body in this boneyard, but he too is gone, his wife Lorne already forgotten. At least she has the protection of the grave, while I have none at all. But this isn't the first time I've had to fend off the prurient interests of a man, and I hardly doubt it'll be my last. I feel Haskell's presence like a snake, slithering about me. He meets my eyes, and it's hard to look away. The umbrella over my head's a snare as well as a shield. He's silent for a moment, and then says, My word is honorable, Miss Tilney. But words are weak without incentives to bolster them. He scans my face, then the rest of me. Anxiety chews at my stomach, but I refuse to show it. I make myself stone, projecting power, control, a belief that I have both. The contract I signed with your father is legally binding, he says. The law now recognizes me as your guardian. I hold all stocks in the business. By all intents and purposes, the survival of your family now rests with me. He pauses, lengthening my pain and his pleasure. In the breath he takes, I hear the tightening of a noose around a neck. My neck. He rolls his hand through the air, nonchalant in his predation. Why not sweeten the pot? I stiffen. What are you proposing? Exactly. I fire my insult at him with the force of a flintlock. You are a despicable cad. I'd never marry you. I expect him to lash out as before, but he only grins that slick, malicious grin. Never is a word easily altered, Miss Tilney. Do not be so quick to reject me, and don't be so quick to mishear me, I say, swallowing the lump of disgust building in my throat. When I say never, I mean it. You're in no position to refuse. All the same, I do. Frustration tightens his jaw, but he smothers it. The advantage is his, and he knows it. I know it too. It would be cliché of me, dear girl, to say your passionate, nay impertinent spirit only adds fuel to my fire. Nevertheless, I'd be cheating myself out of the pleasure I feel not to say it. Mr. Haxel's slick grin spreads a little wider, sickening me, spurring me to run. I run until my lungs ignite with fire and my legs break away from me, extensions of an incredible fear propelling me down the pebbled street in town and onto the dirt footpath of the orchard, where I trip on the twisted root of the tree and skid to my knees. I rip off my bonnet, tear the constrictive cloak away. I can't breathe. Clouds of foggy breath whirl about my face as I take in great gulps of air. My heart will burst out of me if I don't cool it, and my head is high, up in the treetops. A laugh gusts from my mouth. How comical, running from Haskell as if he were a poacher, intent on catching sweet game. What a game, this running, this chase. I scrape my hands, shreds of skin and dirt and clotting blood, they sting. What a game, this game of fear. A poacher. That is exactly what Mr. Haskell is. I sicken, not from the sight of my bloodied hands, but from how narrow my escape really was. I don't want the attention, the wanton desires of any man, and I don't want to be wanted in that way. The fire in my lungs intensifies, eating up all of my air. My body leaps up on its own accord, and my legs begin again to run, back to the path, to the road, but not to the cemetery and the man who thinks that he has a claim on me. But what if he does? The thought lances, terrifying. If the poacher takes a shot, he may strike true. My running is defenseless. I'm too panicked to see a way out of this nightmare. My lungs feel too small to breathe, and I stall out in the middle of the road. Black spots flash across my vision, the world darkening with every failed inhalation. Running is useless, and my body knows it, so it freezes. Arms, legs, knees, they atrophy, and I collapse once more, the world too much and too big, an incessant roar of blood and fear and pain. And as I go down, fighting against the dark of unconsciousness, I hear the wheels of a carriage grinding upon stone.